Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Man arrested after crashing stolen car. PDP names candidates for Tobago general election. Voters divided on incumbent MPs' NACTA survey finds. And internationally, Greenland rejects U.S. visit amid takeover phase. Now for the details. Police in the Southern Division have arrested a man following a crash involving a stolen vehicle along the Solomon-Hotroy Highway. Around 1:30 a.m. on March 22nd, a 42-year-old man parked his Kia Cerato near a bar in San Fernando, but later discovered both his keys and car were missing. Officers later found the crashed vehicle near the Harmony Hall overpass and arrested a suspect attempting to walk away. Investigations are ongoing. The Progressive Democratic Patriots has confirmed its candidates for the April 28th general election. Party leader Watson Duke will contest Tobago East, while Curtis Douglas, head of the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association, has been selected for Tobago West. The ATFA has been vocal against the THA's handling of compensation for fisher folk affected by the February oil spill. A NACTA survey reveals mixed voter opinions on incumbent MPs contesting the April 28th election. While some PNM and UNC candidates are seen favorably, others face criticism. The survey also suggests lower voter turnout and internal divisions within the UNC over candidate selections. NACTA says former Prime Minister Keith Rowley stepping down has boosted PNM's chances, while new Finance Minister Vishnu Danpal has the highest approval rating among the recent appointees. Greenland's leaders are condemning upcoming U.S. visits amid concerns over former President Donald Trump's interest in the territory. Second Lady Usha Vance and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are expected to visit, prompting backlash from local politicians who see the move as aggressive. Trump has previously hinted at wanting to acquire Greenland, sparking strong opposition from its leaders. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
WESN.
As time goes on, and of course, we're going to be caught up with the election. And I think a similar phenomenon is going to happen as what happened with COVID. It's almost like if all of the other things no longer, we take it for granted that they're still there. Technically, we know that they're still there. Issues with crime would still be there. That would be a situation, an issue on the election, issues with the economy, issues with education. They will all technically be issues of the election, but to some extent, we're kind of hitting the pause button, and we're kind of ignoring, to some degree at least, whatever developments occur in the various sectors of society, the various issues that might be technically urgent, but as a society, forget the politicians, as a society, we lack the determination to act on it with urgency. And one of the things, one of the subsections of a subsection of a section with crime, of course, there's narcotics. With narcotics, there's synthetic narcotics, and then you have essentially the new trends in the drug industry. Now, there was an article where, you know, there's concern about synthetic drugs. Some of it, it's not necessarily the type of recreational drugs that we have not heard of before. But I guess to some extent we do have to wonder, how far will trends hit us, and will we be able to keep up? Because in a lot of things it seems as though we really are not prepared to deal with certain developments of existing in 2025, certain developments of what's happening on the internet, certain developments where our laws, which to some extent are based on a pre-colonial system or an interpretation of a system which is still, we're talking like something in the 70s at best. Some of our stuff hasn't been updated, and now we you know, to what extent that we will potentially become a source, but also, you see, right now we're a thoroughfare, we're a highway, and we have a lot of weed. And I don't know to what extent hard drugs are used in the country, but I know it's used, right? It's just that I don't necessarily see that many people who, to some extent, it appears it's reasonable to assume, hey, that person using hard drugs, because you can kind of tell they look different from other people. But it's not like I have a good grasp on what it's like throughout the country. And it's not like we have a set of overdose deaths in TNT, at least that's reported. But as time goes on, and perhaps the social dynamics changes as we follow the trends that you see abroad, as we follow the trends that is essentially, you know, consumed via observation of what other people do on the internet. We already have concerns with regards to our young people and potentially the proclivity of suicides. Not only will some young people start to have those thoughts, then make the decision, and then others will see that done, and it's almost like if they didn't think about it before, they'll consider it now. If they were on the fence before, they will give it greater weight now. And to what extent? I already know that a lot of my peers in my school-age days were smoking weed. I don't know what would have happened if hard drugs were available. We are a thoroughfare, and at times we get cocaine. And I know to some extent certain other drugs, it's like ecstasy, certain prescriptions. There's already an interesting phenomenon tied to dangerous drugs that are technically over the counter because they're misused, and it leads to young people harming themselves, and I'll say no more about that. But given the trajectory of our crime, what happens if we start to become both manufacturers of certain synthetic drugs? Not just a highway and we maybe get the excess, but what happens if we really start to become consumers now? First of all, that potentially could, whatever benefit the cynical, pragmatic, quote-unquote, people in authority think we might be getting from the illegal criminal activity, because to some extent one must wonder how much illegal money is propping up our economy. I'm not too sure if it is anymore, but was, to some degree or another, a significant source of private investment and the origin of certain businesses that we take for granted as everyday brands today. But depending on our level of consumption of illegal narcotics and synthetic drugs, to what extent will, if we become consumers, not only will we have to deal with the fact that somebody has to pay for it, and it has a very good tendency of causing poor people to remain poor. It's one thing for poor people to want to spend their money on alcohol and in the casino. It's another thing on hard narcotics. But we've seen the prevalence of weed in TNT. Dare we wonder if ecstasy, cocaine, whatever else, prescription pills, which is already a vulnerability, and to some extent this all could be happening and I might be blissfully unaware to the extent. But at least right now, it's not exposed in a way where we should be alarmed, or we could be alarmed. And what happens if it reaches that point? What happens when weed is not enough and alcohol is not enough and, you know, the next generation needs to prove that they are edgier, that they're cooler than the previous generation? I'm not talking like my generation to my parents. I'm talking like every 5 years, every 2 years, I have to be cooler than the forms above me. We progressing. We not like them. And then what will we do? Are we prepared for that? Because with the murder rate, it was gangsters killing gangsters. Then it was gangsters killing gangsters while hitting innocent civilians. Then it was gangsters killing gangsters while hitting innocent children. Then it was gangsters killing old people. Just straight up. Then it was gangsters going after prison officers and police officers, SRPs. Straight up. What's next? We could see the escalation of gun violence. So why would we think that drug usage cannot escalate? Right now, there's a little bit of a warning sign from our national security corner. I'll call it little, right? But I do wonder if people are even concerned. It's bad, the weed is bad enough, Mr. Safanana calls it all the time, and to some extent he's right, it's ridiculous. The reason why I say the weed is bad enough is not because I see young people smoking weed all the time and think it's detrimental to them. It's bad enough because it is still that profitable of an industry apparently, because we get millions of dollars worth of weed apparently all the time. I wonder if it's almost like the bone that they throw the TTPS to keep them off the trail of the harder stuff. And maybe United States authorities ain't gonna let that slide. Because the last 2 cocaine busts, I believe, included US agencies. But is that enough? This is just one more of those things where, are we gonna wait until it becomes a bigger problem that's so big it'll seem like another Everest? How are we gonna climb this mountain to solve it? But the unfortunate reality is, if a lot of our basic systems, including law enforcement systems, but also things like customs and certain government systems and certain informal societal systems, like the village, like community, if they are deficient, if they are dysfunctional, well then we really are so vulnerable, there isn't much we could do to stop anything from exploiting us. Meanwhile, speaking about being exploited or dysfunctional, you know, WASA had to condemn recent acts of vandalism. I don't believe it would describe what the vandalism was, but apparently there was an incident earlier, a few days ago, or 3 days ago, where people tried to compromise infrastructure at a certain, well, at the Hermitage booster station, I guess. They didn't actually directly say it, but that's the location mentioned. They didn't necessarily say what was the act of vandalism, but the point is, think about it. You could be as frustrated as you want with WASA, right? If you want to throw paint at the sign at one of their headquarters, administration buildings, You know, if you want to do graffiti, all right, fine. That's technically against the law. But if you're that frustrated, while I can't condone it or agree with it, I can understand it. But if you're frustrated with WASA because of the water supply, and your retaliation or your way to express your frustration at the water supply is to compromise the water supply, is to further reduce the availability of water for citizens of the country. That's like saying, you know how I'm going to protest all the murders? I'm going to go and murder. That don't make sense. How am I going to protest? Well, to some extent, this is similar to the complaints of the government. How do some people protest bad roads? They potentially damage the road. And that shifts to a different dimension now, where it's almost like if there's this interesting thing where at times our desire to be compassionate and to seek justice causes us not to be champions of the right thing, but rather to be too aggressive and unknowingly do the wrong thing. Sometimes it's merely counterproductive, and sometimes it's outright destructive. Now, of course, the question is how far will things go? But think about it. What could you possibly be vexed, unless it's something that's a you problem, like my wages or my manager bad, or even if it's an illegal water trucking scheme, you're not helping yourself. And okay, let's just say, well, it's not your area you interfering with. Why you had to inflict pain and suffering on other people, on other citizens? That was a bit disappointing to see, to be honest, that they had to. I can't think of any good reason why it could be not justifiable, but why it could be understandable, because it will never be justifiable. Why it could be justifiable? I think I'm going to damage WASA infrastructure today. For what purpose? To what end? What is the message you're trying to come across? That you're being mistreated? That's not how it works. Last thing I want to mention before we take the break. Chief Secretary Faliga said he had the opinion that they're open to negotiate with Sandals, but to some extent Tobago has to have a say. The thing is, this is one of those tricky situations because I guess the dynamics of our politics make it difficult. Ideally, of course, Tobago will have a say. And by having a say, I don't just mean, oh, we'll have consultations. And the consultations are just going through the motions. And it could be as long and as extensive as you want, but the reality is the majority of it, if not all of it, will be ignored by the desires of the two key players involved. The key players involved, believe it or not, are not Tobagonians. The key players involved are the actual people that's going to do the work and the actual person who's going to fund the work. Without those two things, it kind of really doesn't matter. I understand, and I'm not saying this to disparage Tobagonians. It's just like literally that is what is practically required. Not necessarily what would be ethically required or morally preferred, but what is practically required. So I do wonder to some extent, and this could go back to the THA's complaints, the development budget of Tobago is being controlled by central government. The flip side to that, to some extent, is the THA as a executive body and a legislative, well, not a legislative body, but a representative body for the island, essentially, and perhaps this is where the local government reform would have been, you know, another level of subtle intelligence, because it would have framed the THA as just another local government body. Even with autonomy, to some extent, the national budget and national expenditure, central government is responsible for that. So this is one of those things where it's obviously, you know, I might come across being idealistic or oversimplistic, but does central government just give the THA the money? Should it be part of the budget? Which is a fair complaint by the THA, or at least something that is a fair consideration, that they should get more money for the development of Tobago because they are there. But then for certain projects which arguably could be national level, is it that central government has no right to be involved? I understand, yes, tourism, the fifth schedule, it's just one of those things. Because the flip side is this, the THA needs to be careful now. If the THA is allotted the money and the THA is going to foot the bill, because my assumption is the Sandals deal will be similar to other deals like Hyatt and Tobago Hilton. We own it, they run it. If anything goes wrong, they could abandon it and we'll be left with the bag. Well, if the THA now, if the money's coming through the THA, to some extent the THA will be responsible for it. And then if the THA says, well, you left us in the lurch, it's like time out. If you take enough of the responsibility, if you want the final say, if you want the money to pass through you, then if things goes wrong, like with Magdalena, that will be all on you. And that's, to some extent, I guess you could say, you don't necessarily want a regional corporation to be handling projects of that size. I mean, not all the time. THA is different though. So that's what makes it to some extent difficult. This is something where at the end of the day, it really is up to us as a nation to determine what the relationship and the divestment of authority should be. What should be delegated to the THA, what should be kept by central government, because technically the central government of Trinidad and Tobago is not the government of Trinidad. To some extent, some of the ways that Farley Augustine has phrased some of his criticisms, he's made the central government in some of his phrases and some of his messages seem as though it's the government of Trinidad. And in many ways, I think that is counterproductive to the ultimate goal of what a lot of Tobagonians have. But part of the problem is, it's really left to us to define it. To some extent, ideally, autonomy or the authority of the THA and of Tobago leadership would be defined slowly and stably with precedence as situation comes up, as opposed to trying to think about it all in one go and probably not getting it right, making mistakes. That's generally how it goes, right? But that process wasn't really done. And now we're in a spot where Tobagonians feel disadvantaged. But part of the problem is, by trying to say, we want autonomy, you know, we want it all in one shot, well, part of the reason why it's difficult to figure it all out at once, I mean, think about it. What is the actual, definitive, detailed description of Tobago autonomy? Because you need that level of detail to make it law. You can't just put a generalized saying, Tobago has autonomy in law. Just leave it like that. You can't. And there are going to be a lot of hard decisions, and there's probably going to require compromise that maybe neither side would like. And it's probably still not going to work as intended initially, and there's going to be growing pains that we should have been going through since the THA started, but to some extent, the THA got stuck in adolescence and never grew up because of the political dynamics, because of what our society tolerated in the political sphere. And now we're left with this. And I guess one of the things about autonomy is it's trying to correct a mistake, but it's trying to do it too quickly without enough foresight or without enough information, because all we know is we have a very incomplete system that doesn't seem to work very well. It doesn't stand up to various challenges. But I have yet to see even a reasonably detailed solution of how to fix it, rather than just say we want more autonomy. It's easier said than done. And this potential Sandals project, again, more autonomy also comes with more responsibility. It's not something that should just be thrown out there willy-nilly without serious thought. But if we don't have that, well, because at the end of the day, there's a reason why we're together. And it's one of those things that I'd rather not risk. But if that's the direction it goes, well, it's not up to me. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll go into a couple stories in the Daily Review, and then we'll welcome our guest. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
And we're back here and talking about the WSND Content Capital, and I did say that we're going to go with the Daily Review. However, our guest is here. So I know the big story is the ruling from the Privy Council. We'll get into that possibly tomorrow with the good lady herself, Karen Sashera. I very much expect her to have a lot to say on that. Fortunately, for, I guess you could say for the JLSC, Lady Simler did not, I believe, write the ruling this time, because that would have been one hell of an interesting, just cherry on top, bacchanal bubble factor. But she was part of a 5-member panel that essentially, well, the ruling came back, I guess, as some people expected, and it brings a lot of questions. But unfortunately, while that juicy piece of news is happening, we also have a situation, there's an election just, in 5 weeks. I don't know if you've heard, something very, very small and minor. Now, with that said, the PNM did essentially a blitz where they went through the process of appointing Stuart Young, giving out their candidates, and then announcing this election in the span of, 3 days, Sunday into Monday into Tuesday last week or a week ago. And we haven't had a chance to speak to one of our geopolitical analysts. Now, I understand that some politicians, who do you appoint analysts? That's a thing, right? But given his credentials, I do believe Dr. Shea Mohammed qualifies, so we will continue to engage him as such. Hopefully, Dr. Mohammed, you are not concerned over the comments of some politicians over the qualifications of talking heads on television.
No, because because some politicians are politically relevant and they've only surfaced after 5 years, collecting handsome salaries and not doing the jobs that they were elected to do, and have nothing else to do but focus on whether I'm an analyst, a scientist, an activist, or whatnot. We could always have another discussion about my qualifications compared to theirs.
Boy, yeah, it's one thing to say, oh gosh, look at UE, we should be proud of our local institution, but not so many people that are in it just because they happen to speak out against us, especially with one group of potential academics who has the eye of both the UNC and the PNM. So there's a part of me that is like, well, if both of you have issues with them, I personally would like to hear what they have to say. But that's just me. Now, we haven't had a chance to even reach the topic. I believe we have a slate, a PNM slate. We're waiting on the UNC slate of candidates, but we have the PNM slate. We also have, to some extent, we know who the current ministers are, but they're in a weird position like the Prime Minister. I don't know if to call them, technically it's not interim, right? The phrase, the term caretaker has been used to describe the situation. Essentially, dare I say, they are potentially, most of them, lame ducks, because we don't expect all of them to continue on after the election if the PNM win. Of course, all of them are in that spot of will the PNM win or not for them to continue. So I guess in general, given what has transpired a couple of weeks ago, what do you make of it so far with the PNM and this slate?
Slate. Is there much of a slate, to be honest? Slate is not a lot of changes. The slate has, let's be real, to be realistic about it. There are about 15 safe seats that are shared between both the PNM and the UNC. And I don't think that those qualify for a discussion, because more or less, that's what it comes down to. About 15 seats more or less shared between the UNC and the PNM. Holistically, the PNM would like the country to think that what they've put forward is something new. That is not necessarily so, because we have to take into consideration Tobago is very much in play in this election, and there are several political parties that are going to be contesting the Tobago East and West seats. However, I think the three main political parties to watch in Tobago would be the Tobago People's Party, the PDB, whether or not they get any traction, and of course the two incumbents from the PNM. When it comes down to, and we have to take into consideration that there's an anti-PNM sentiment in Tobago, and that has been even further exacerbated by the results of the 2021 THA elections. The fact that the government and the THA has been at loggerheads because there is a lack of synchronization and respect in terms of allowing Tobago to chart its way forward with a level of understanding, well, not a level, with an understanding that those that are in the THA, they have goals and objectives to achieve to make Tobago a place and a space of economic growth, development, sociological progress, what have you, and a national contributor to the economics of Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. And I see Tobago as a haven for a lot of potential, but the potential is inhibited by the control and the maintenance of the control by the central government, more or less, more so this central government. So there are many, I mean, we'll go into Tobago in a bit, right, in great detail. In terms of Trinidad, there are 15 seats, more or less, given between by either side. Of the current complement, there are only 3 seats that separates the UNC and the PNM. And those 3 seats that help separate the UNC and the PNM are also the 2 Tobago seats. There are 8 seats that determine an election. The 8 seats have been La Hocktatal, Paro, St. Joseph, Toko, Sandy Grande, San Fernando West, Barataria, Sango, Shogunas East, Maruga, Tableland, Tunapuna, now to a lesser extent, Pointe-a-Pierre. So, yes. So, those persons have been on the ground from both parties for quite some time. And with the exception of Diego Martin West, Labre, Laventille East and West, and Dabidi O'Meara, there aren't any other changes to the current cadre of seats that I expect PNM to take.
Well, I mean, there was a new NACTA poll reported on today that I guess...
Do we pay attention to the NACTA poll?
Well, to some extent, yes. I mean, we'll have to see how, because they're making... We are in a unique situation with Stuart Young. Apparently, according to NACTA, they agree with you that voters would have liked to see more changes in the PNM. That there's an acknowledgement that, yes, the change to Stuart Young is at least something that voters seen as a positive in the sense of, okay, Dr. Rowley is moving on. So in that position, there is, to some extent, change. And I would argue that, in a way, it's similar. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Dr. Rowley himself, before they were political leader, you know, when they became political leader, to some extent, it was seen as a change, right? But the latest poll findings did acknowledge the people who were polled, so it's not necessarily going to be the entire country as 100% accurate. They did acknowledge they would have liked to see more change. If you're going to say that you're changing, you're getting more young people, you're updating your slate and stuff, I think essentially the voters are like you. They're not feeling that it was enough to say that this is a new PNM slate, but rather this is maybe a minor new painter coat on the same old car, right, that you're trying to sell me.
Well, I have a perspective, and it's I like to be controversial. If the current cadre of persons that make up the government are not getting along, and they are not in agreement with the positions that they hold now, or the positions that the appointments that have been made by this Prime Minister, and it is partly responsible for such swift actions towards a general election. How is he going to appease those very same persons who are going to be elected members of Parliament if he has to form a government on April 29th?
Well, let's get into some of those things, as I don't believe, as much as we've talked since then, off air, and we've scheduled to try to have this discussion. I don't think we've spoken about those appointments that he had, and of course some of them kind of took the public by surprise with regards to the AG. To some extent, there was a report done the day before that said that Marvin Gonzalez would be Minister of National Security. So technically his appointment didn't take me by surprise, but the report took me by surprise because he wasn't associated with that ministry in any way, unlike Keith Scotland in the past. So I was wondering, why would you necessarily make that change? Among others, of course, technically there's a new Minister of Finance right now, and that is the one minister that apparently, and I guess you could say it's by default, right? People in the know might have a different opinion. That's the one minister that the NACTA poll says has in their poll 100% public approval rating with their respondents. And
I guess how could that person have 100% approval rating when he's been appointed for what, a week?
Well, that's the thing. There's no negatives. So I guess this is one of the things in politics, I think. New people just are inflated because they have no controversies or baggage yet to drag them down. And that is, to some extent, I feel the low bar that we have set. Would you agree with that?
Well, the low bar in terms of the person who is holding the office or the person who he succeeded?
Holding the office. He doesn't have any recent bias, or he doesn't
No, but you see, you can't even talk about somebody who has confidence. You can't talk about confidence and having 100% confidence in someone who has been in the office for how many days? A week?
Well, right, because I think the public, they're not judging it based on job performance, which NACTA has said, you know, actually some of the respondents have said it's a shame that they can't see more of Stuart Young before the election, and maybe that's part of the reason why it was called early, right? Because you're already a two-term incumbent, your party, so it's an uphill battle. But that's to the minds of the respondents and to the minds of voters. Lack of negative, that's the low bar set for positive. That's the low bar set for, oh, I have a positive perception of this individual. Because when you think about it, just about anybody that's been in politics long enough, you're going to find somebody that hates them. Somebody will have some reason to hate them, and for the most part, it's not like a reason that is foolish and dotish. It will be a reason that, at the very least, it will be debatable, and it will not necessarily be easy to move that person's opinion from. So,
well, I could gather that the new Minister of Finance from his appointment was quite ambitious, because he started it by saying he intends to, just impose no hardship on the society and no austerity measures on the society, and he was looking at measures in which he could improve, the economic standing of the society. But I don't know how much he can do in 6 weeks.
Well, you see, to me, given his statements, given the statements of Minister Gonzalez, it made me wonder if what they're doing is they're not talking about 6 weeks, they're talking about quote unquote when, right? Because they want to appear confident when they win the election, assuming they will retain those portfolios, what they will do. I mean, we don't even know if they knew that the election was going to be called the following day. So, of course, everybody will have their own opinion on that, on how that decision
and from what I understand is that there was no intentions in the April 28th and the possibility of April 28th was a contingency plan, but I don't think that, from my understanding, there were several issues that arose behind cameras that would have triggered the alarm and sound the election bell, because it appears that Minister Young, unfortunately, did not use wisdom, I would say, and strategy in his choices, which caused some serious discord within his party. And, that is what led to what the election and what I call the unsustainability of the government. But for me, that also says that Dr. Rowley sheltered this man for such a long period of time that he didn't give him a taste of political reality. And had he given him a taste of political reality, maybe he might have been better equipped to look at personalities, understand dynamics, and make better choices. I think that this is my belief that, and looking on and observing what has transpired, that the collapse of the government and the unsustainability of the government really and truly was based upon poor judgment, lack of understanding of political dynamics, lack of understanding of political power within the political party system, and inexperience in leadership.
I would just like to say, technically speaking, we can't say that the government collapsed, because I wouldn't say it has necessarily collapsed yet. But the potential of it collapsing, given how things are going.
In my world, a government collapses the day after it is sworn in, and an election is called.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Essentially, you have there's an analogy that I shouldn't really say on live TV. Not a bad analogy, but a brutal analogy that I shouldn't really say on live TV.
The government collapsed one day after being sworn in, and the ambitions of, I mean, when you listen to the speech, the inauguration speech of the Prime Minister, sorry, and then when you listen to the ambitions of the Minister of Finance, the government collapsed.
So
24 hours thereafter.
Can you tell us, because I assume part of it is what you're looking at is who he appointed in his cabinet. And again, there were a couple of decisions. I know speaking to you a week ago, and I guess two of the things that raised eyebrows, or three of the things that raised eyebrows, right? The Marvin Gonzalez one, it didn't necessarily raise eyebrows. It was a surprise. I don't think anyone necessarily sees it in a vacuum negatively, but there is three situations, if my memory serves correct. Of course, there's Common Bid being moved to the Ministry of Public Utilities. Technically, he's an engineer. I don't know if, you know, that, I mean, arguably works in transport, might be the best position for him given his expertise, but I'm of the opinion that a politician doesn't necessarily need to have technical expertise for certain ministerial roles because they are the civilian oversight of said roles. Then, of course, you have Camille Robinson Regis as Attorney General. It's not the first time.
Which I don't believe was, it was not for me. I'm not saying that she's not qualified.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's the lady, is an attorney at law. She may not be practicing, or has not practiced law for quite some time. She was not on the roll of attorneys. She has since said that she's fixed that. But even that scenario was not a necessary scenario. I think if there was no need, and I don't think, even by her words where she said she was surprised by the appointment and the approach to be Attorney General, that in the dynamic of the government and taking the government forward and sustaining the government for as long as possible in order to, as the NACTA poll, we utilizing the NACTA poll. I'm not a fan of the NACTA poll. Based on what its finding is and what we're saying is that people would have liked to get a chance to judge Stuart Young based on a longer period of time where he would have shown some level of leadership qualities and ability to manage people and manage a cabinet and whatnot, right? There was no need, in my opinion, to appoint Camille Robinson Regis as the Attorney General to quote-unquote appease her because she was already a game player. She was already a team player. She was already, you didn't have, she was not one of those that needed convincing that this is the way we should go.
So you think that her support was more or less behind Stuart Young, you know?
Yeah.
She would have given it because this is essentially where, for lack of a better way to put this, and I apologize to Dr. Heath Rowley if he takes offense, but basically to say his faction or his clique, obviously they want Stuart Young for whatever reason, better or worse, not debating that right now. She was all in on that because there's a part of me that says, was she really surprised? Like, if what you say is true, well then yes, I can understand why you would believe that she's surprised. But I, of all people who are willing to take what politicians say at face value, without good reason to say it is not so otherwise. I know, I'm like, was she really surprised? And perhaps, to fair to you, this goes back to your point. Perhaps he thought, this is Stuart Young, that this was the right move, and he kind of did too much, I guess you could say. He was rewarding someone who, this was not necessarily the moment to reward people. This was the moment to kind of utilize whatever bullets you have in a chamber to deal with dissent as opposed to reward people for their loyalty. Unless maybe he was thinking this position is so senior, I want someone loyal. And I think I mentioned this to you before, and I said this on air. She is the opposite of Reginald Amor. Reginald Amor is the lawyer who has no political experience, and I think there's literally not one situation that he handled well. He might have broke even on some, but for the most part, there was way too many bad handlings, bad public communication, bad positions, right? And perhaps, this is my thought, and this is very common human psychology. If one extreme didn't work, we'll go to the other extreme. We won't try to find a compromise in the middle of someone that has enough political experience and a legal background. We'll go to the other extreme potentially, right? Not trashing her credentials as a lawyer, but obviously her strength is her political experience, not her legal one. It's why the report of Keith Scotland to some extent might have made more sense on a practical level. Here's someone that obviously he's not as new to politics as Reginald Moore, and he has just been named senior counsel, and well, somewhat recently. And when he was, it's not as though people were like, he didn't deserve that. So that might have been a more practical choice with regards to the technical aspect of it, but maybe you're correct, Stuart Young. He made a political decision, and it may not have been, because the question is, would she be the AG in the long run? This is one of the things we don't know.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
Do you think because of that, that's why he made the decision? He thought, well, I'll just let her be the AG for a little while? Or maybe to stabilize the situation?
I don't think that it was something that, okay, there are some people that they could aspire to become Attorney General. She served as Legal Affairs Minister. She served in other capacities. I don't believe that there was a need, and I don't think that even Camille saw it as a need for her to be the Attorney General. And when she said that, she was a little bit taken aback, I don't think there's a need for Camille to lie about it. But what I think is he probably did have a conversation with her, and as she rightfully said, when a prime minister asks you to serve in a capacity, you really don't have the answer is never no.
Yeah, if you say no.
You don't say no to a prime minister, minister, I would like for you to serve in this capacity. I mean, depending on depending on your personality and depending on your relationship with the leader, you could probably have a conversation about why me, right? Or you sure that that me is the person you want? It's not necessarily judging or criticizing or questioning the judgment of the leader, but just like you sure it's me, and depending on the leader and your relationship, you'd get a response from the person. But in the political dynamic that Stuart Young was facing, it was he could count the people that he had in his basket. He could have counted the people that he had on the fence, and he could have counted the people that he had opposed him. And in my opinion, if I was him and I had to make a decision, the Attorney General is one of the most is the advisor to the cabinet. He or she is also one of the components that make up the cabinet. The Prime Minister and the Attorney General makes up the cabinet. They form the cabinet, right? And quite frankly, political strategy, political tactic, astuteness would have, for me, I would have chosen somebody who might have been on the fence or may not be for me, but I would have sat with them and said, listen, we need to secure a victory for the party in the long term, and we need, yes, while I understand we have our differences, let us try to work together in the best interest of the country going forward. So a simple discussion might have been able to calm the storm a little bit and give him some more time. And let's just say instead of having a month or 6 weeks, he could have done with a 8 weeks or a 9-week period to give himself a footing. Because let's be real, the reality is there is an anti-PNM sentiment within the majority of the population on the ground. People feel that they've been not given due attention and services. They've not treated humanely. They've not treated well. They've been lack of communication, lack of opportunity, just a lack of. And therefore, in that period of time that the PNM has been in power, while it is, and I continue to say this, all of the good work that the PNM would have put in, and I'm using the word good work very cautiously, all of the good work that the PNM would have put in. For example, the Ministry of Digital Transformation and the work, and I can tell you about the work of the Digital Transformation Ministry because I've also taught students who who come out of the Ministry of who work in the Ministry of Digital Transformation, it's been a ministry that has done good work in the greater interest of digitization of the public service across the board. Now, if I'm advising in an incoming administration, a new government that is, let's just say, because we're in an election, we have to see it in all the different dynamics. If another administration were to come into power, one of the ministries that I would say that they should not dismantle, and they should, the work that has been laid down there, the foundations that has been put there, should not be discarded because of the money, public money, taxpayers' money that has been spent, infrastructures that have been put in place, equipment that has been bought, systems that has been formulated, is the Ministry of Digital Transformation. Now, has the government done other things in the best interest of the people? I would not say no. But have they communicated what they've done to help Trinidad and Tobago? The answer is no.
Because you could say that because you have knowledge directly. But from where I sit, so I won't speak for everybody else, but from where I sit and from what I've heard, the government has failed to communicate what the Ministry of Digital Transformation is doing to the point where it looks like an underperforming ministry, not a performing ministry. Now,
correct.
The thing is, I do wonder, there are a couple of parallels in the reverse, so maybe, parallel loosely, in the loosest sense of the word, with regards to the time of the partnership and the 2015 election. One of those things I do wonder, this NACTA poll might actually be showing, okay, Stuart Young is the one major change that they have here in the political landscape of the PNM in their re-election campaign. It's Stuart Young. They're not necessarily having a re-election campaign of vote Stuart Young, but the change to Stuart Young, to some extent, that's the one thing that voters have identified. Is the PNM kind of running the risk that they might have a similar situation with the Vote Kamala re-election campaign? I know the PNM doesn't have a coalition, but you've pointed out, NACTA poll has pointed out from the respondents, the rest of the slate isn't necessarily all that. I myself think the Marvin Gonzalez move had some amount of positivity, but again, with 5 weeks, how much could you really build? He is trying, to be fair to him, he is trying. But
no, agreed. And I did, listen, I didn't have an issue with regard to the Marvin Gonzalez appointment as Minister of National Security. I did have an issue with the fact that Keith Scotland. Yes, I did have an issue with the aspect that Keith Scotland, senior counsel, was bypassed for Attorney General. Keith Scotland was bypassed as Minister of National Security. I do believe that Marvin Gonzalez did what he could have done with the resources that he had, with the
public utilities.
He's done some work that he's tried to do his best in public utilities and his portfolio. He's also been one of those ministers that have been more amenable to the public. He's been more accessible to public. He's been more accessible to the media, in terms of his responses. And I mean, in the greater scheme of things, if you were looking at least liked or more liked persons in the government, he's one of those who's more liked than least liked.
But I mean, he is an exception to the way I started. I do wonder if too much of this re-election campaign hinges on the candidacy of Stuart Young. It's not necessarily a vote Stuart re-election campaign, but perhaps some of the negative responses could be similar to the Vote Kamala re-election campaign, where it's like one person, a coalition don't make, well, in this case, one person, a government don't make.
Yeah, and the difference between the similarity between both of them is that they're both running for prime ministership, and they're both running to be, leaders of the government and leaders of the country for the next 5 years. Now, we have to take into consideration that there are also several geopolitical things that are taking place in the world, and as every day goes by, there's something new that is coming out of the Trump administration, and those new things that are coming out of the Trump administration are a direct link to the Stuart Young's role in the government and his role in putting our eggs in one basket and jeopardizing what our geopolitical future looks like.
Let me phrase it, let me set it up so you can knock it down. Basically, he's tied to the energy sector, and essentially 100%. The setbacks, is that essentially going to, ironically, Dr. Keith Rowley is the other person that was heavily involved, and he's not there. So is it all essentially going to just easily fall on him?
Yes, it would, because people will not forget Dr. Rowley's final, his final interview on the before he left. Nobody's going to forget his last speech on the platform before he left. And one thing we have to take into consideration in that final interview is that he endorsed Stuart Young based on Stuart Young's ability to negotiate well and to negotiate all of those energy deals with the US. But we didn't take into consideration. What I have a difficulty understanding is, you are in politics for so long. You are in politics for 45 years. Stuart Young is in politics for 10 years. Why did they behave in a manner, especially when elections are unpredictable, and US elections since 2016 has been very unpredictable? Why did they not have a contingency plan in place? And they decided to not just put all of the eggs in one basket, but they literally put the goose, the eggs, and the basket in one direction, taking into consideration that at one point in time they did, for a couple of years, for 4 years, they did have to deal with the Trump administration. They did have a falling out with the Trump administration. Trinidad and Tobago was literally persona non grata in the eyes of the Trump administration. Why would you do business so headstrong without taking into consideration that you were going to deal with another Trump administration?
I want to switch to Tobago before we end, because you brought it up earlier, and there was a thought that I had that I want to get to. This is one of those parallels that I was talking about. Essentially, back in 2015, the TOP won the seats before 2015. The TOP party was part of the People's Partnership. They won the seats in the House, but they lost the THA election, right? It was, to some extent, unexpected, at least to the degree that it was. I do wonder if that dynamic will be reversed, where at the time, the PNM successfully was like, you see, the partnership is them Trinidadians, and we in the PNM, we the Tobagonians, we have the THA, it's us to represent Tobago against them, right? And it's not working. But now it's the reverse. Now the TPP is in the THA. The PNM, they have the 2 seats, but I guess maybe this is Farley kind of taking a page from not too distant history. Whether you like it or not, and there's some aspects about it I don't like, but at the end of the day, politically, it's sound strategy. The THA is Tobago and us. The PNM is Trinidad and them. And I actually do think we could see a similar dynamic here, where that anti-PNM sentiment, it was successfully flipped from, you see, it's easy for the PNM to say we are Tobago when the opposition party, the UNC, is so unliked by Tobago. But now, when you have someone even more indigenous to the island, you can't play that same game. And I do wonder if they haven't been able to pivot enough, and it puts those 2 seats really out of reach for the PNM.
I think it's a different dynamic in this instance. So, for example, it is unfortunate timing with regard to the TOP's THA election in 2013. Right. We have to take into consideration that when the TOP election and the THA elections of 2013 had come around, the partnership was facing the height of it had started to begin the downward spiral of unpopularity. There were several scandals, there were several resignations, there were accusations. What I'm calling scandals is accusations, right? So there were accusations, there were resignations, there were firings, there are all of these things that were making the population started now question, can the partnership survive beyond 2015? Can they pull it back? Can there be something that would be able to propel the partnership to have a turnaround? And smack in the middle of all of that was the THA elections. Now, my attitude towards the THA elections, while I am Trinidadian, while I do have a connection and I feel, accepted in the Tobago space, and I'm grateful to the Tobagonian people for, for their courtesies and their support and their all of their their hospitality and all of that, we have to take into consideration that I believe that Tobago's politics should be left to Tobagonians to decide. And my approach to, even though when I look on in hindsight, the TOP should have been allowed to use its resources in government, outside of, when I mean in government, meaning the TOP people who were in the government at the time should have been utilized only together with the TOP political apparatus and frameworks in Tobago and been allowed to campaign on its own.
Yeah.
There was no need for the entire whole government to go in there to, given the fact that Tobagonians were like, what is going on, right? What is happening here? Yes, we are part of a government, but that don't mean we like all of you. We don't, that don't mean that all of you all need to come into our space. And we don't need to, even if at some point in time, the Prime Minister at the time had made a one-time or two-time stop in Tobago, taking into consideration that the Magdalena, the airport, the refurbishment of the airport, the hospital, other things were being done and delivered by the central government, it should have been left to the TOP to do its business, right? That's one thing. The next thing is, in this dynamic, Tobago has shifted gears and they've given their mandate to the PDP, which is now the TPP. Under the THA Act, you don't identify the administration. The Executive Council is known as the Executive Council of the THA, regardless of which party it emanated from. What I do believe is that 2021 sentiment of the Tobagonian population has sustained itself, and they are not prepared to go back into a THA led by the PNM. That's the first thing. And I think the PNM has struggled in Tobago at the Tobago PNM Council level to engender some level of public trust and confidence, and there seems to be a lack of
similar to
a lack of depth in a lot of the arguments put forward by the minority leader in order to give him greater popularity and for him to rebuild that 14-1 dynamic.
I do think the Tobago Council made a mistake kind of leaving him on the outside of...
Correct. And listen, even when I spoke, I speak to everybody, and even when I spoke to him, I did have a conversation with him, and I said, you need to start positioning yourself within the Tobago Council. And because at the end of the day, you have to recognize your worth, because you were the one person that was able to stand up to scrutiny and win that WIM seat, right? Now, that into context, the lack of resources that the Tobagonians believe were not provided by both Tobago West and Tobago East MPs in their roles as government ministers in the Tobago space is also something to take into consideration. There are a lot of people who are saying that Ayana Webster-Roy and Shamfa Kojo didn't do enough for Tobagonians, and even in the aftermath of the 2021 THA elections, they did not do anything to close the rift, to close wounds, to show that there was going to be a camaraderie that would work in sync in the best interest of the Tobagonian people, regardless of what. Because the Tobagonian culture is very different. Tobago is very small. Tobago only have 60,000 people on the island. At the end of the day, in one household, the political dynamic in that household could be mother voting PNM, father voting TPP, children following Watson. So that's the kind of dynamic. The neighbor that you're getting your roast bake from, or your saltfish from, or you go run by for a garlic or onion if you run out while you're cooking, is the same person that is going and vote for a different political party, but that don't mean we're not friends. The person over there, it's a different dynamic altogether. And they don't have that hatred and that discord. They can see beyond that. And what I think people expected was some respect, that they exercised their franchise in the THA elections. They indicated that they no longer wanted the PNM. They wanted to go with a different political party. Even with the transition from Watson to Farley, and from PDP to TPP, Tobagonians feel that they are still getting resources, they're still getting work done, they still have a connect to the people, they still could see that things are happening in sport and youth and culture, and community development, and tourism, and agriculture, and health, and you name it. They are still seeing that things are happening. There's still a connection, there's still discussions, they're still dueling the role as secretaries as well as representatives, and people still feel comfortable in that regard. So as such, I don't believe that Tobago is prepared to swing or to remain to maintain the status quo. And the Prime Minister did not do any damage control by going to Tobago and telling them there were 60,000 crabs in a barrel and behaving like 60,000 crabs in a barrel, and all they're doing is rah-rahing and rah-rahing, and who don't like this and who don't like that one. That just simply bolstered their belief that they were being talked down to and they were being dictated down to, and that they would not be, their interests were not being sought. Because the truth is, you build a $1 billion airport, it is magnificent in its design, it's magnificent in its look, but how many international flights are scheduled to land there on the day that it is opened? It has a capacity of 3 million passengers a year. How many passengers a year currently pass through what currently exists in Tobago? You have removed, you've put the air bridges and the plane bridges, so you've taken away that island culture, that island breeze that will hit you in your face when you land at the airport and you walk out of an airport. That is an airplane, sorry. That is all part of the culture. Have you ever talked about why Barbados decided that they will build a good airport, they would have good airport facilities, but they didn't incorporate the airport bridges, the bridges from the airport? Because when you walk down the steps of the airport, you want to see sun, sand, and sea.
And feel it.
And you want to feel it, and that is the product. Now, that is what exists in Tobago.
Now, I had to tell you, pause there. We had to move on. We have callers, but I just want to get 2 points out. One, like the partnership, PNM have accusations. I'll just say that. But two, I think one of the mistakes politically of the PNM was to not give Farley the extra budget. Because the problem is, well, you control the money, so it's your fault.
John, it goes beyond that. I mean, I've been asking questions. Not the budget is one, but a simple thing about not giving Tobago the opportunity to go ahead with its plan.
Okay. Shane, I was transitioning. The point is, they take the blame, and the TPP don't want to prove anything because they didn't have the money. We have a call on the line waiting for that whole soliloquy. Good morning, caller. We apologize. You're on the air.
Yeah. This is the Go Martin, and it's nice listening to you all. But I want to switch the conversation a little bit, and I'll come back to the politics. The Chief Justice on today's Express editorial must resign. That is what they're saying. The Southern Association head say we need an immediate investigation for him to step aside. In 2018, the LATT, the president then was a fellow by the name of Mendez or something. They had an investigation into him. They had 2 senior counsel opinion given to the Prime Minister to investigate him. He went to court, and a judge who is related to the president say he had nothing to answer. The Prime Minister went shopping for an external opinion to keep him. What were we protecting him for? Because this really is a serious issue. That is why our AG, Mr. Limor, ran out of the country, because he had 2 big barrels coming down at him, the Auditor General and this one, and he was the advisor to Cabinet to take that to the All Privy Council. And we're not only spending money, we're spending food money for lawyers. The other issue is this. This judgment tells me 2 things as a Bush lawyer. His competency and his promotion protocol for choosing. Is this a parallel line with respect to the TTPS, how they choose people? Because a number of those judges who give this judgment in the lower court, throw it out, you had to go to the Privy Council to change around everything. The other political issue, this fella from Lavantil West who is caught in a controversy with a company in England, I'm not going to call no names. You know what he failed to do? He failed to tell us who was the other shareholder. Yes, we know the minister now, he's now a minister, was on the, what they call is the shareholder arrangement. I want to know who is the other one. He failed to do that. Likewise, his political opponent failed to do that. I want transparency. Now, what one of the newspaper has been doing is pontificating for him, telling us his qualification. He has a master's degree in engineering, most likely get it out there. I want to tell the public in Trinidad and Tobago, and this is a heinous sort of utterance, and I apologize. We had a PhD chemical engineer who lost his head and was the nephew of a government minister. You all remember that thing in the early 2015, 2015, something around there? Remember that? I'm not going to call nothing. And when all of those things happen, about 5 people get pulled or arrested somewhere in Twin City. Look at the link. He was the Minister of Health and he was a former PNM Minister of Health. And I'm saying no more. The person with the PhD in chemical engineering starting with K. So certification and qualification have nothing to do. Show me your friend and I will tell you who you are. The fact is that in an associated put him on to the shareholder that he formed the company is. Who is that your good friend? Let me see too. Who is he? Is he a member of the 6 or the 5 or the 4? I'll go and have no more.
Thank you, caller. I mean, I'll just say this. First of all, we select AGs that always seem to need advice of senior counsel because, heaven forbid, their senior counsel status, somehow is not as good anymore. I don't know if because they need someone to take the blame in case things goes wrong, a la one of the last things Farris did. I'm just saying. I won't hash into that because I've brought that up multiple times on the station. But the Chief Justice, I think he has made similar mistakes to other heads of critical institutions. That is to say, we have an HR problem, somebody did the wrong thing, because the Privy Council didn't clear Marcia of any wrongdoing. But what they did say is the procedure that they did, she didn't have a chance to defend herself. They should have gone through the disciplinary procedures. It was wrong in what they did, the undue pressure. It is what it is. That's what the Privy Council said. She's not necessarily clear, but they did the wrong thing, and it seems as though they can't help. Oh, we have a controversy, so we're going to try and fix it and end up in more controversy. I mean, that's essentially what went on with the Auditor General situation, isn't that so? So
I'll say this. I think the persons who this touch and concern the most, and the persons who are the main stakeholders in this matter, as it pertains to the Chief Justice, are the different legal associations. And as the caller rightfully said, the different legal associations have all come out and they've shed light and said their part. And they've indicated what this means to them and what they believe the route should be. And I think that the ball is now in the court of the cabinet to decide what the next step is and how it should be treated. And I think, all of the judgments fell short of reinstating the judge. But common sense will tell us, I think that is only one of the right things to do at this stage. But I leave the judiciary and the legal fraternity to deal with that aspect of it. I don't want to talk about it from a political science perspective, from a HR perspective, from a public administrator perspective, from a public management perspective, in the interest of ensuring public trust and confidence in our judicial system and transparency and accountability. I think one of the things that could be looked at, and I say could being the main word here, could be looked at, is inclusive of everything else that the judges of the Privy Council have said, that one of the things that should be looked at, and I think the legal fraternity will say, is her reinstatement. As it pertains to the, if you want
in what position? In what position? In the position that she was supposed to be advanced to that cause of controversy?
Yes. Because the law lords, from what I've read, is saying that she needs to be compensated from the 8 years ago, right? So where her rank would be from the time she started 8 years ago to now is where she should sit in terms of the level.
I don't agree with it personally, but given how it was handled, how the Judicial Legal and Services Commission handled it, I do think essentially you might be very much correct. Procedurally, that should be the way to be done, because how are you're gonna discipline her 8 years after the fact now? Things start to get very squirrely.
The thing, based on what has been said and what all of the legal fraternities have said, you discipline her in terms of what?
No, but I think the Privy Council is basically saying you should have gone through the proceedings and let her have a say. It's just that 8 years now, it's not the same thing. They've kind of set themselves up to not really have any room to maneuver because they mismanaged it from the start. So yeah, I can't fault you for your position. We have Maraval on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Hi,
morning.
Good morning. This is not the first time that that judge, or what's his name, did that to somebody, because had a judge who her husband was sick, and she said she can't go to Tobago. He said he don't care. You go to Tobago and do what I tell you. So it's not the first time he do that. Like he apparently like to bully people into doing things that he want to do. But I say he take her from one job and put her into another job. When they realized that the lady had cases to do and she didn't fulfill it, he said that's not a problem. Now to know that the woman now get a problem in court, and now she lost all she benefits and things. Could she get back her benefits and things as
she could.
She win the case?
Yes, she could, yes.
Yeah, because I find that is so wrong. If they put you there to do a job, don't be biased. Give the people their due. Don't bully people into doing what you want. It's not right. If you want somebody to do you that, you know, give everybody their fair chance and work. If somebody family is sick and can't able to go out of the country, let the lady stay and do her work in Trinidad in the same work she's doing. You know?
Yes. Thank you, Paula.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think with the Marseille Caesar situation, arguably the level of due diligence that the Chief Justice undertook, how are your cases? And I'll just take your answer at face value. I don't know if that's the tradition. I don't know if that is even actually the procedure. But
yeah, I don't know about that.
I would like to think that level of due diligence is, I look into it myself. You know, like, I am the Chief Justice. Why can't I look into it myself? I have staff. If I don't have enough time, I have staff. And the thing is, I kind of see this similar to national security services, where you look at the heads of these various institutions, the judiciary, the police, the Coast Guard, the regiment, and one of the things that I can't help but notice as a common through line is you all seem to not be able to manage your people properly. And that's why between the Coast Guard, the regiment, the prison service, and the police, and the fire service, how many promotion court matters do we see and promotion scandals, right? And here we have now something that is, okay, to some extent it's anecdotal, it's not like the whole judiciary is falling apart, but look what happened to those, the victims of this situation. Is not Marcia, it's the people of Trinidad and Tobago who had cases that got caught in the middle between lack of due diligence on one side and personal ambitions clouding their judgments on the other, to kind of put it politely. I could understand when people are saying he should resign, because I think in a general sense, if we want to have definitive improvement, I don't know if we could wait for things to improve under the current leadership of these various institutions. You know, not saying that specifically Chief Justice should resign, but in general, one could argue in general, some of them should be replaced at the very least, and maybe he is one of them.
Again, another important decision and discussion that falls on the lap of Stuart Young, and I don't know if he's equipped with the skill set to deal with it.
I mean, there's a part of me, we'll get into the UNC next week, I believe, but there's a part of me that's like, I hear what they're saying on the campaign trail. A lot of it is just negative for the PNM, which that doesn't necessarily tell me what you're going to do. A lot of it is what we did in the partnership.
You know, I paid specific attention to them last night.
Yes.
And because I wanted to get an idea of what was being said. I wanted to get an idea of the energy. Did they have, is the number of persons that showed up to full Naparima College auditorium something to look at? Obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says something. At the same time, when I was looking at the video, the live stream that was that was being broadcasted, there were like about 7,000 people looking on at the UNC's meeting, right? Online.
This is online. That's pretty good. Yeah.
There were 7,714 persons looking on at the UNC's meeting online. I'm like, okay.
Folks, for Trinidad, that's pretty high.
That's pretty high, right? So, okay. So I was like, all right, that's one. The other thing that I think the UNC has to be mindful about, and Mrs. Prasad keeps saying it, but I'm not seeing it yet, is that people are looking to see some new faces. They are looking to see new candidates. And not, while I will argue that they've had people on the ground in the marginal seats and there are new faces in those marginal seats, some of those faces have been in the UNC for many years, but now they're serving in a different capacity, which is good. But I think it is very important that while the ground is going to carry it, and that's one argument, you can't simply expect that an anti-PNM sentiment is automatically going to guarantee you a general election win. And at the same time, marginal seats are just as important as safe seats. And safe seats are the people that you have in your pocket. And when I say in your pocket, in your basket, in your collection of votes. If you don't take into consideration that those seats also need young, vibrant, professional, excitable personalities and capacities, you can't expect that there's going to be a huge movement of people in one direction. So it has, all of the factors have to be taken into consideration. And I think if the UNC gets overconfident, it could also lead to their defeat.
Now, looking at the situation, yes, they are the two-term incumbent. As much as Stuart Young is the new leader, it's a new face of the franchise, but it's the same team, and to some extent, it's a lot of the same players, right? They are behind the 8 ball. I have said this repeatedly. This is the disadvantage of being a two-term incumbent. In modern democracy, that is almost a guaranteed loss. Almost, but not quite guaranteed, right? Now, looking at it so far, given what you've said, is it quite possible that, obviously, the considerations of Stuart Young, we don't know all of the reasons why he was put in the position that he's in currently, but is it quite possible that, given the dynamics at play, to deal with a situation where you are at a disadvantage automatically, and you don't necessarily have any recent accolades that you could just point to and say, I did that. Me, I accomplished this for you. No one else could have done this. I did that. The Prime Minister could say what he wants to say about behind the scenes, but politicians already have a perception problem with regards to their accomplishments already. And the last thing that's going to help them is tooting their own horn, and that's essentially what most of them try to do. It doesn't really work. Is he the right person to try to deal with this? He might make a good Prime Minister, but it's not necessarily about making a good Prime Minister. Now it's about, is he the right person to try to get the PNM across the hump of going from two-term incumbent to third term in office? Because that is one of those thresholds, right? If this was a video game, that's like the difficulty of this one part of the game just increases exponentially. And if you clear it, maybe then you have an easier run for the next 10 years. But if you don't clear it, it can mash you up. And it's one of those things where it can make or break a political career. It can make or break your run. Is he the right person for this? Because I don't know. You're pointing out things where he might not have the experience.
You see, again, Stuart needs to be able to show the real Stuart Young. I don't care. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are talking about. They talk, first, he grew up on Upper Henry Street. Then he's a boy from Davie. Which one? Choose one. Which one is your identifier? Is it that you are? Did your mom move from? If your mother's roots are in Davie and Lalbihari Trace, and you grew up in Port of Spain, and you grew up as a tongue boy, and you went to St. Mary's College, and you lived a certain lifestyle, you have to own it.
Mm-hmm.
It is what you've grown up in. You know nothing else. It is what it is, right? Don't try to be something you're not.
We have a caller from Maraval. I want to take last caller. I want to take this caller late, but we'll take the call and then we'll continue. Last caller. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Hi. Good morning again. What I didn't see, all these people in UNC, right? You can have a lot of people on the ground, but when time comes to vote, you think they'll vote for, all of them will vote for? People will come out to see what is going on in the party, what they're coming out with, what they're putting forward. And the next thing I didn't hear, that if they have all the candidates to go up, I wouldn't see that.
Thank you, caller. Yes,
and the next thing, is I find that man, I don't know his name right now, should resign. I didn't see all the candidates that UNC put out. All UNC PNM own, but I'm not saying UNC owns. I wish somebody can help me with that.
Which candidate? Which man?
The judge, or what they call him.
Oh, okay.
The Chief Justice?
The Chief Justice.
Yeah, I find
yeah.
But I'm not seeing the UNC candidates. I've seen all PNM candidates.
Yeah.
If somebody can help me with that.
They haven't announced their candidates yet. That's going to happen next week. So we'll get to that. Thank you, caller.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. I just want to point out what you just said there. Own your background. I'll just say this. I know of a doctor I'm acquainted with. He's a friend of mine. I haven't spoken to him in a while though. He's from Central. He went to school in St. Mary's. He basically told me the benefit of going to school in St. Mary's, not about the education, not about the name. To him, it was the fact that he had such a diverse social circle across the economic and racial spectrum, and I would imagine religious as well, right? And it's something that he valued, that experience. And I've seen where similar experiences have made people, they've had brighter horizons, better opinions, more tolerance, more willingness to collaborate, more open with how they deal with people. And Stuart Young is maybe a bit older, but potentially of a similar generation. And it's not all negative to be from Port of Spain, but I guess if they want to have their cake and eat it too, but it don't work so, because you can't be from two places at the same time.
You can't, and that's the thing, I could identify with regard to, I grew up as a salt boy. I grew up in Princeton. I lived all of my life in Princeton. My life is walking down the road in a short pants and a rubber slippers to go in the grocery and in the market and to lime on the corner with the neighbor and that sort of thing. I've taken that behavior into where I live now, and I just go by the doubles man. Yesterday, I was making my rounds yesterday. After I finished my rounds, I park up by Pablo, and doubles was what I was going for. You own your identity. You own what you come from. You own where you came from, your moorings, your background. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. What I think is important, regardless of where we come from, whether it was poor, whether it was middle class, whether it was privileged, whether it was rich, whatever it was, at some point in time in life, the journey of life allows us, because we don't live in a cocoon, even if we use the formative years of secondary school, secondary school teaches us a whole lot. I always say that my personality, my foundations, my ability to speak came from my foundation, which is in Stevens College in Princeton. My former principal, Linda DeCoto, who passed a couple weeks ago, my Dean of Discipline, Alison Sloanseed, who I credit, and all of my teachers, and even my friends that I made back then were part and parcel of my foundation, because you got to see people from different backgrounds, you got to see people from different living conditions, different family dynamics, parenting, and it molds you into understanding what the different fabrics of society looks like, what the different dynamics of society looks like, because you cannot be immune to that, and you cannot be living in a cocoon that you don't understand the dynamics. What I think that Stuart is lacking at this point in time is that he's trying to be portrayed as having humble beginnings. And you can't want to behave like you have humble beginnings, but you really and truly did not have it. And it's not a bad thing. If you didn't have it, you didn't have it.
Yeah.
There are many politicians who just didn't have it, and they grew up a very privileged life. They may understand, or they may have experienced certain hardships, but there are plenty of them who live a good life, right? So let's be real. That's one. Authenticity is important in this. So in the leadership theory, I would say, what Stuart needs to do is be able to make himself as authentic as possible. His hardest thing for him at this point in time is to disconnect himself, and I call it the Kamala Harris effect. He's going to have a very difficult task disconnecting himself from all of the decisions of Keith Rowley and where we are today. But the question that even all of us will ask is, well, if you were sitting next to Keith Rowley and you had the influence and he had your confidence, did you not have a conversation with him and say, Prime Minister, I don't believe that this is the way to do it. I think that I share a different opinion and I think we should try X or Y approach. Or is it that you were just simply the OJT in training and you were just being mentored and coached without an opinion or a thought or a perspective or an idea or a philosophy or an ideology or a feeling, right? Because politics is all of that. So that's one. Two, if it's a anti-Stewart, anti-PNM, anti-what they did campaign, it works good for the narrative. But I've been saying as well, goodies are great in a campaign for the opposition. I'm waiting to hear about economic policies, diversification, revenue generation, employment opportunities, job opportunities for young people, diversification in terms of the market for employment and what we could create for young people. All Stuart has talked about is creatives in terms of, like, I want to know if we are the new Hollywood, because clearly we are backward compared to Jamaica, where reggaeton and reggae music is in the international forum. It is in Hollywood. It is on the Grammys. So that he has to come better than just simply soca, steel pan, and music, right? But at the same time, I think, as the caller rightfully said, caliber of candidates are going to determine whether the UNC goes forward or stays where it is or falls backward. And while there's a lot of hard work getting done and a lot of campaigning being done by marginal seat candidates right now, the country is also waiting with a bated breath. Now, I will say this. I understand that even if Mrs. Prasad Bissessa, and she does have a difficult decision to make, there's no parliament. The parliament is not in session. She requires no votes. And therefore, in my opinion, that she has free reign. She can do whatever she wants. She has to understand that legacy is important here. And what does she want her legacy to be? A one-term former female prime minister, the first female prime minister that after her, there were no opportunities for another female prime minister to emerge because she never won another election, or she was too emotional in making her decision, or she didn't have enough consideration for other options beyond the comfort zone. There's a lot of dynamics, and this is not me saying it. It is callers like yours that express themselves and say, well, we're waiting to see X or Y. Yes. And I'll say this. In the coming week, we will see it. Taking into consideration, we are going into a season, a weekend where we have to observe some level of reverence and respect for the Islamic community and for the spiritual Baptist community, and therefore I don't expect there would be much politicking going on in that long weekend. But the minute the long weekend ends next week Tuesday and we go back into Wednesday, there's 2 days to nomination, and there's literally a dash to the finish line for 3 weeks to the general election. In those 3 weeks, by nomination day, the country will have a greater view as to what is in front of them from all political parties. And my issue here, Sean, with regard to the population, and my concern, I should say, not an issue, is that there are different feelings. There's either a groundswell anti-UNC, anti-PNM and pro-UNC. Or people have already made up their mind that they're not voting at all, either PNM or UNC. And we could end up with either a swing in voter turnout being very high or being low. And if there's low, both sides could scrape through in Trinidad and see what happens in Tobago, or it could give either side a very slim edge. And I think this is an election that for opposition especially for the opposition, it shouldn't be as hard as I am making it out to be. It should be quite easy. It should be easier to predict. But at this stage, it's not. Even my seniors are saying that it is too close to call, and that's the truth. Because there are several seats in play, but those seats that are in play, like La Hoquita, like St. Joseph, like Toco Sangre Grande, like San Fernando West, Barataria San Juan, Moruga Tableland, they are in play, yes, and they are shifting in different directions, and you are seeing it on the ground, but those seats will also be influenced by if you put mediocre or you keep the status quo in the safe seats, and then what are you going to end up with? So, you know, in the days to come, it has to be very clinical.
Well, oh, we might have just... Dr. Mohammed, you froze. And we might not be able to get your last point in. We're running out of time, so I'll probably have to start wrapping up now here. With that said, the EBC has already come out to report that they're extending their hours, so I expect, because of the high engagement by the public, I expect voting turnout to be better, perhaps, not necessarily high or record-breaking.
It was 58% in 2020, and that was during a pandemic. I do note that there's severe voter apathy as well, and we can't deny that. And what I think the population has, the politicians need to do is go out there and speak to what is affecting the population and what is going to cause them to vote. I do note that there's also a huge segment of young voters that are either not going to vote,
yes,
and if they do vote, they are going to choose another political party.
Well, I'll close with this. I think what it is the opposition party, the UNC, had an opportunity where a lot of people, all of a sudden, as the caller from Marvel said, they wanted to see what the UNC has to offer. Even if they weren't supporting the UNC or weren't going to vote the UNC, they were willing to see, to engage, to put their eyes there, right? To give the chance, throw me a pitch. What's your best sales pitch? Now the question is, has the UNC got 7,000 in a stream? And people were watching via the various television broadcasts as well. To what extent did they successfully, or have they successfully given enough of a pitch? Right? Even my own family members were looking to see. Doesn't mean that they are going to vote. And I think that's essentially the reality of what you're saying, to put it all together. They have an opportunity. Can they take it? I'm not entirely sure. Now, with that said, I'll just, one last statement. Me and my friends, mostly from North, we've been enjoying Princestown for the last couple of months, right? And that's all I'll say about that, right? You know, I am more than amenable to there's something about going south to enjoy the atmosphere, whether it's a house lime or to a restaurant, where it's a nice change of pace for someone from the north. So I would recommend people, hey, don't take Princestown for granted. You know, it might be a nice excursion. A nice, you know, Princestown, San Fernando, there's a lot to do. You know, if you want quiet, if you want a little bit of pump, there's a lot to do there. Might not be quite like Port of Spain, but hey, change your pace, change your taste. You know, just a little shout out there to the people in the south. Dr. Mohammed, thank you for joining me once again. And of course, we're actually scheduled next week, just before the UNC announces their candidates. So we'll see how that goes there, because there's certain other topics that you want to get into more deeply, not so much the candidates themselves, but also some of the battleground situations that we could get into. Because to some extent, I think we need to understand the election ain't 5 months away. It's 5 weeks away.
And not even 5 weeks away.
Not even. All right, folks, want to thank the callers. And again, thank you to Dr. Mohammed. This is Talking About WSN, show Michael Small here, reminding you to make today a good day. As Mr. Shah would always say, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. And during this election season, always remember, it's nice to be nice. Even if the person in front of you is going to vote to the opposing party, still be nice to them, because we all want people at the end of the day. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff.